I typically do 2 to 3 sets on a movement. And how I break up my failure system is I do, on the first working set, I'll do 2 reps in the tank. The second working set, I'll do 1 rep in reserve, and the last set is to failure. That's typically how I structure my training. Is that the be-all, end-all? Fuck no. But that's how I structure it. But if you're going to take every single set to true failure, if you really knew what that felt like, I mean, you would just be in a fucking hole in the ground. You would. But again, most people aren't reaching that point. And yes, Yamada, I would recommend doing as many reps as possible on the final set, because it is what I do, and I like that strategy. But again, like, man, I've very rarely seen somebody come into training and hire me and be like on point with understanding what failure really looked like, felt like. It's again, it's something that you learn in time. It's going to come with maturity and training age. You know, when I first hired my coach, who was an Olympian competitor at the Mr. Olympia every year, dude, he humbled the fuck out of me, man. Like, I hired him 2 years ago, and he was like, it got to a point where he's a pretty blunt guy and he's very hard to work with. But I appreciated that, and that was kind of the person I needed, because he would get to a point where he'd be like, dude, did you even watch this? Like, how could you watch this and even like think you should send this to me? Like, yeah, that's pretty fucking harsh, but like, it makes you think, damn, man, like, what am I doing? And then you start to really see what that feels like, and you're like, oh man, like, the people that do this every day for years are pretty fucking crazy. But that's what I wanted to get to, and that's what I strive to get to. And you're not going to know what that feels like right away. I don't expect a new trainee to understand the true amount of pain and tension and like difficulty in a true set to failure. So when I give these guidelines, I have that caveat in mind. So as a general guideline, I would just say, most oftentimes, if a young kid who's newer to training asks me, should I take everything to failure? I just say yes, simply because I know that this isn't going to be an actual set to failure every time he goes in there. But if I got somebody who's a 7-year veteran who I know can, you know, lay it all out on the fucking table, I'm going to tell him, hey man, you got to pull back. And that's what I usually have to do with the more experienced guys, is I have to pull them back more than push them forward. The novices, I have to really lit a fire under their ass. So we'll go on to the next topic. If anybody else has more questions, either at me in chat or go ahead and DM it. Looks like I got something here. All right, let me look at your question, Yamada. Let me read it for a sec. I'm new to bodybuilding. I'm still a beginner, linear progression, still trying to improve it. I'll try to add AMRAP to it. Does failure on one exercise make it harder to complete the other exercises? I mean, to an extent, yes. I mean, fatigue will build throughout the session. So you're not going to be able to take a set to failure on one exercise and then just continue to have the same output across the entire session. But again, like, it's all relative, right? So if I take my first set to failure on chest press and then I move into dips and then I do the same thing on the final set of that, like, the stress is sort of consistent across the session, meaning like every time I do chest, my last set of my first exercise is to failure and my last set on my second exercise is to failure. So I'm losing the same amount of net output week to week from exercises 1 to 2, if that makes sense. So like, yes, I'll be less fatigued, or I'm sorry, I'll be less efficient, but I'm always going to be the same sort of amount of less efficient by the time I get to exercise number 2. So, but if I started with dips, I would likely be stronger on them than previous weeks, simply because I'm now not adding that, you know, first exercise fatigue into it. But that's where we get into, like, we're trying to progress the stuff we do each week. We're not trying to progress individual movements by themselves. You know, like, to an extent, you know, if we're always doing the same routine over and over, but we're still adding reps to that routine and we're adding weight to that sort of sequence, then we're progressing. So that's all that matters, is as long as it's consistent. I don't have any other DMs right now or ats in chats. Anybody who has a question, either go ahead and at me and Jen, DM it to me, or go ahead and unmute and ask. I have about another 30 or so minutes, then I got to bounce. Yeah, go ahead. I might have, but if he's got my DM pull up right here, so you can just go ahead and type it again if I didn't fully get to it. This part, okay. I already trained for 1 year consistently. 3, 5. Okay, this routine. Bench press, incline barbell press, bench row. I mean, yeah, I mean, this is pretty standard, Enru. I mean, it looks like a pretty good program overall. It's pretty balanced. I would say that if you want to run it and you know that previously you weren't 100% on the diet um, with your previous bout of it, then yeah, I mean, it's worth running this again with controlling those parameters, you know, because now you're just going to get more results out of it because now you're truly taking advantage of the fact that you're doing a consistent routine with proper nutrition. So definitely go ahead. I'm going to look at the VC chat if there's anything else in there. Have you ever trained anyone or prescribed orlistat? If so, does this make exercise prescription more difficult? Take medicated interventions to aid obesity? That's a good question, actually. That's a really good question. So, for those of you that don't know, orlistat is a drug that's used to treat obesity. It's kind of it's a little bit of a nuanced medication. It acts by reversibly inhibiting gastric and pancreatic lipases or fats. Would it change how I give exercise prescriptions? Not necessarily. I wouldn't really think it dictates too much as far as my training, unless they're having issues with, dietary restrictions or like indigestion issues that cause them to have like less efficiency within bracing and more like heavy movements. Then I'd probably move to more machine work because I know some people that get very upset stomach or other issues with those drugs, so they probably have issues in like using more, I guess you could say, standardized powerlifting type movements requiring a lot of core bracing and things like that. So then I would probably move them into more machine work. But then again, like you said, I would just probably focus on more like overall habits and keeping their diet consistent and things of that nature rather than like tweaking anything with training just because they're on Olistat. I don't think there's anything too like fundamentally different I would alter in that case. All right, we got some questions going in the VC chat getting typed up, so I'll wait for those. So I guess for in the future, I would just type everything in the VC chat so it's easier. Good to know. I've never encountered anyone with orlistat. Just before, we're just wondering. Yeah, I mean, like those drugs, like their mechanisms of action, whether it's Ozempic, whether it's orlistat, they don't necessarily alter anything that's going to affect training to a significant degree. Besides, like maybe indigestion or other issues as far as like overall, just like it's upset stomach or feelings of low energy. So it just may be best practice to have those individuals do more machine type work requiring less overall like bracing. And core stability, just because it's going to be more challenging for those individuals if they're more fatigued. And especially actually there's a pretty good caveat here with that I would probably relate to it. If I put somebody into a steep calorie deficit, like in a contest prep setting, I try to actually move away from barbell squats and other movements where you have to do like very heavy core bracing Torr. And the reason I do that is because when you're losing a lot of weight very rapidly, your waist size is decreasing very rapidly and your center of gravity starts to get affected. So the actual way that your body is balanced and its entire center of gravity starts to shift and change. So if I'm trying to still sub-maximally load them with heavy exercises, when their center of gravity is altered and their overall waist circumference and base of support is now weakened and overall less, that's probably not the scenario where I want to add like heavy compound movements. So I typically start to pull away from those when fat loss gets to a pretty far off standpoint. Just because now our ability to brace and maintain our center of gravity and base of support is very compromised. So putting them into like very strict core bracing body weight squat or like barbell squat or deadlift type movements is something I definitely don't recommend. So in the clients that take, weight loss drugs, I would assume they are on the higher end of obesity ranges. So they're very, very overweight. So their waist size and center of gravity, if their program is correct and on point, it's going to be changing extremely rapidly because the first initial 30 pounds or whatever, if they're very overweight, is going to fall off like crazy. And that's not the time to be trying to teach core bracing, tough stabilization type movements, if that makes sense. What program would you recommend for a beginner slash novice for hypertrophy training, or is it dependent on the individual? It's definitely dependent on the individual. I think any program that you get out there that's kind of cookie cutter, if you are a novice, is enough. I don't think you need to look at like a super specific in-depth needs analysis for your physique or what body part needs to come up relative to this or that. Like you're just gonna need to grow everywhere if you're a novice. That's just the reality. So I don't think you need any hyper specific program that's like super specialized for you. Just find a routine that you like with exercises that you can enjoy and have fun with and that you can be consistent with across like a long time frame. And that's really what you're going to stick with, and that's what you should be doing. Is there any reason you would want to do 4 to 5 if you can't get failure on 1 to 3 sets? I mean, if you're someone who struggles to train to failure and that buildup of lactic acid is substantial enough for you that like really hinders you on reaching true failure, then maybe more sets to less intensity may be for you to achieve a similar stimulus. That's fine. But I would always train people, or I would always advise people to try to push themselves because it appears to me that most of the literature indicate, well, not literature, it's not literature exclusively, but like the biggest guys I know, the guys that I've seen with the most progressions are the ones who do train the hardest and push themselves the most. I still think that's tried and true. And I think that most of the literature that we look at with muscle growth is never conducted on people that are of that sort of demographic, which is why we don't really have a ton of studies that show failure to be significantly better, simply because a lot of the people that are in these studies are not elite individuals who train their ass off. Do you have any opinion on freezing food, either for or against, i.e. does freezing destroy nutrients? No, I wouldn't say it destroys nutrients. There's actually a utility to lower the glycemic content in bread by freezing it and thawing it out. You can actually lower its glycemic response, but that's kind of nuanced and really doesn't matter. I actually use frozen vegetables exclusively just for the ease of prepping them. So no, I don't really have an issue with frozen foods, nor do I have an issue with, putting things in the microwave. I think that's another dogmatic myth that people don't understand because they don't understand how microwaves work. Microwaves purely just make the water molecules in your food vibrate, and friction from that vibration heats up the food. That's why when you put food in a microwave, the food gets hot, and you can use a paper plate, and the plate doesn't get hot. So it's just friction. There's no nuclear aspect or radioactive aspect that you have to be scared of. So no, I don't have any issues with frozen foods or microwave foods. I have an issue with like frozen TV dinners and shit foods, but I don't care if you freeze your stuff or put it away.
Gotcha, thanks.
Yep.
Perfect. Are there any more questions? If not, we can go into a core segment where it's like we ask different myths and misconceptions in like the fitness industry, and then you can give your opinion on them. But I'll just give
Yeah.
time for people to ask any questions. Everyone, please do make sure to ask as much questions as you want. As you can see, Doc is absolutely amazing. It's great that he's joined the community, and also please make sure to try and help support him, so he keeps doing this. And yeah. Okay, there's a new question.
Should I take EAAs or BCAAs? Okay, good question. I get this one a lot. So essential amino acids and branched chain amino acids are essentially a little bit similar. So essential amino acids, if you look at human control trials and data, essentially taking BCAAs or EAAs when you have a healthy diet consisting of whole food protein sources in multiple meals is like pouring water on your head to get your hair wet inside of a fucking swimming pool. Like it's really not necessary, and I think it's more about flavored water than it is about the content of the BCAAs or EAAs. I've really never had a need to use them myself or in any clients. I think they're a selling point supplement that is based on a foundation of cherry-picked literature of untrained subjects who are going to see increased muscle growth with literally anything because training is such a novel stimulus to them. This is the problem that people don't realize with a lot of muscle growth studies is as soon as a study says untrained subjects, I throw it away. The reason is you all you know, if any of you in here are somewhat experienced, you know what it was like when you're trained for your first 6 months or whatever, or a year in the gym. You blew up like crazy because, again, everything was such a novel stimulus to you. So your body adapts very readily at first, and then that progress starts to slow off. So, again, those people are so new to training. I mean, they will do anything and show a huge increase in muscle growth. So when they use those things for studies to show, oh, this supplement or my supplement or this company supplement grew all this muscle. It's the fucking great shit, best thing in the world. It's really just a matter of the fact that their patient population was untrained subjects. And this is like 9 out of 10 times the case. There's some literature that suggests EAAs may be beneficial, but it's not enough for me to write home about, or any bit enough for me to spend $50, $60 a month just to drink them, especially when I'm going to get all of them from whole food sources if I structure my diet correctly. Save your money. I'm a beginner and I haven't made much progress on most of my lifts. Some days I do amazing, other days I can the reps I would usually get with decent form. Do you have a theory on what's causing my inconsistency and lack of progression? Ooh, it could be many things, man. It could be hydration. It could be your overall sleep quality. It could be the amount of time you're taking in between training sessions as far as volume. You could be just not recovering in time before that subsequent session of the same body part. Stress is another factor. That's a good catch, Enryus. So one thing I would say as far as assessing when to know if your volume is enough, too little, too late, I would say I don't like to use soreness 100% as a good vector, but I would say as a general guideline, you should be somewhat sore after a training session the next day or the subsequent days after, especially if you're training, you know, decently hard. So if you're not getting any soreness whatsoever, you're probably not doing enough volume or intensity. But let's say on the other extreme end of the spectrum, let's say you hit chest on Monday and you're doing a push-pull leg split. So your next pushing muscle group training day would be on a Thursday, for example. If that soreness from your session on Monday is carrying or lingering over into Thursday's push session, you're doing too much. It's time to scale back. And that's sort of the gauge you can get into. And if you find that sweet spot where you're sore for a couple of days and you're feeling it, but that soreness dissipates entirely before that Thursday comes, you're in a good spot. I wouldn't fuck with it. I gotta go to about 3:30 is where I'm gonna call it. And then if you guys want, depending on how we get the feedback from this, typically weekends are my best. So if you want to make it a weekly Sunday segment, I'm happy to do that. And then we'll just time it out, make it an announcements, and then we'll do this every Sunday if you want.
Yep, that's
How
perfect.
many minutes? How many minutes are these? Time difference? It kind of, man, just to be completely honest with you, the one today was just relying on how much I wanted to tolerate it. You know, I'm 5 weeks out from a bodybuilding show,
Hmm.
so the amount of mental energy I have was going to dictate how long I went for this. But you know, this is what I love to talk about. This is my life's research and what my PhD is in, so I can talk about this shit for days. So it depends on how long and how many questions we have. If there's still people in here and there's still good questions being asked, you know, in the future, I'll stay in here for a very good amount of time. It just kind of depends.
Yeah, we can probably use a more agile methodology. I don't really mind. Sundays is good for me. But yeah, the time differences because I think it's like
Yeah,
six
that's where
hours. Yeah,
I
6
probably
hours.
1 p.m. Eastern. 1 p.m. Eastern is probably best.
Perfect.
Doc, I'm related to a related note to soreness. What do you tell trainees who experience joint pain? For example, I feel that I could do more on leg press while my muscles could, my knee joint can't. Another example, my right wrist has pain during triceps pushdown. Okay, good question. Um, so joint pain oftentimes presents itself as a means of mechanical injury from people jerking around weight and training just with their ego. Now, I'm not going to say that's a concrete always the answer of why that takes place, but oftentimes its onset comes from improper training, and then it's compounded by the fact that they never gave themselves the time to heal and then continued to push on. I've done it myself. I wanted to be the tough guy. I didn't want to stop training, so I was just pushing through mechanical injuries where I felt kind of shitty and I was very tired, and I just went ahead and trained anyway. But the caveat to that is if you have joint pains and you have issues in your elbows or your knees, there's ways that you can mitigate that. One resource I would look into is Knees Over Toes Guy for anything knee related, or Aaron Kubal. Um, Tendons, joints, ligaments are just like muscles. They have to get an adaptation to stress. They have to build tolerance to things to be able to function normally. So, what I like to do with clients who have lingering knee pains or shoulder pains is I like to first, okay, let me say this on shoulders while we're on this topic because I hate this shit so much. If you are the guy that goes into the gym and grabs two 5-pound plates and starts rotating your shoulders in and out to warm up your rotator cuffs, you look like an idiot. Where is gravity pointing and where is that resistance going? It is going straight down. So you're not even applying resistance to the external rotators. You're just applying resistance to your biceps holding the weight in a semi-curled position. The gravity is pointing purely downwards with that weight. So you're not actually adding resistance to the rotator cuff itself. If you're going to do external rotations to warm up the rotator cuffs, do them on a cable at around nipple height, so you're actually adding resistance horizontally to match the firing pattern of the rotator cuff. That way you're actually using resistance in line with the line of force that the rotators are actually activating. So that would be the number one tip for shoulders. Do some cable external rotations with light weight to warm them up. Another thing for knees would be I like to do static holds on a leg extension at end range. So I like to put, like, let's say 25 or 30 pounds on a leg extension, very minimal weight, and I'll hold the semi-locked out position for about a minute to 45 seconds, and I'll do that for 2 to 3 sets. And then I'll move into some like active dynamic sort of lunges where I bring my knee very far forward into very extreme ranges of motion back and forth just to open up that joint space, open up that tissue. And I find with many clients when they do those sort of things before going into leg days, they virtually have no knee pain because now the soft tissue and the connective tissue around that joint capsule is warmed up, it's moving through extreme ranges of motion, and it's ready to go by the time you're starting to pound the weights. I assume it's the same for wrist pain. Yeah, it's very similar. I mean, with wrist pain, it becomes, I mean, if you have to, you can use wrist wraps, but I'm not a fan of just adding devices to you that strangle the shit out of a joint to maintain training output. I mean, I want to address the underlying issues. So that's where a physio could come into play with doing joint mobilizations, some soft tissue work may be in order. If you guys have insurance or you guys have parents who have insurance, a lot of the stuff can be covered depending on where you live. So if it's really bothersome, you know, I would follow the advice of a physio or a physical therapist. I mean, that is what I do and I can help you, but you know, that is my job. I can't do it for free. But you know, it's going to be a matter of just allowing yourself to slowly build up strength and stress on those tendons and ligaments with warming up to then be able to now use it for your training. But if there's a topic, Ayo, that you wanted to delve into while we have this last 20 minutes or so, let's go ahead and do that.
No, I don't have anything specifically. I just thought it would be fun to just go through some myths, just some like facts or myths type of thing. And then also, FYI, I have been recording / streaming. I hope everybody's okay with it. If you are not, I will just purge the footage. And also, what I would just try and recommend to everybody, please do try and support Doc however you can. Doc, feel free to share your socials. I'll give you access to the influencer section, and I'll also add it in the post after this. Please do support him, because if we can have this weekly, this is great for everybody. It's great for Doc, it's great for us, it's great for you. You get to ask your questions, you get access to all these resources, everybody wins, and everybody's happy. So cool. Does anybody have any other questions? Please do ask your questions, because I think that's the main focus. But if you don't, I'll go on to the facts or myths segment. I see people typing.
Yeah, when we have a bunch of those, I can go into.
Okay.
There's so many that are
Yeah.
extremely pertinent in our field that
I've got some
kind of
troll
drive me
ones
insane.
for the clickbait. Don't don't take them seriously. Right? It's like, oh, of course sumo isn't cheated. Just don't take any of it. Yeah. Okay. I think Rolling and Thor have asked some questions.
Do you think Dymatize ISO is a good long-term supplement? Fuck yeah, rolling. I've been using ISO 100 by Dymatize protein for, God, I want to say 3 years now. They've jacked up the prices and they aren't very keen to helping mom and pop type shops. I work with supplement owners and supplement store guys, and they really do not like to work with mom and pop shops and give better discounts. But man, as far as their product and quality control, like Dymatize is the best. Like their protein tastes phenomenal. It's the cleanest process. It's third party tested. It goes through an extra hydrolysis and filtration process that makes it very, very clean. It absorbs great for me. I'm not someone who's heavily reliant on protein supplements. I will always advise somebody to go towards whole food meals, always first and foremost, rather than use protein. But if you have to use it as a supplement, I would definitely recommend it. It's great stuff. Great, great stuff.
Thank you,
Does it
bro.
matter when yeah, no problem. Does it matter when I take creatine after or before workout, 5 hours after? Does it influence my performance when I take it? Yeah, so creatine helps. So when you use energy to exercise, you have a system in your body that is pretty much your main mechanism of energy. It's called adenosine triphosphate, ADP, or ATP, sorry. Adenosine triphosphate is the main molecular energy source for all things that you do in your body throughout a daily basis. Now, adenosine triphosphate can be converted in many different ways. The main way is when we ingest carbohydrates or glucose, there's a series of physiologic mechanisms that take place in pyruvate metabolism, oxidative phosphorylation, the citric acid cycle. We could talk about all those things, but it's not 100% necessary. It's just kind of just word vomit for guys who aren't studies of physiology. Basically, when you ingest glucose, your downstream effect becomes ATP. Your downstream effect becomes energy when you ingest carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are the main energy source of the body for everything. But ATP, adenosine triphosphate, results from 3 phosphates as well as an adenosine molecule. What creatine does is it allows for more free radical phosphates to be in the system, allowing the body to create more ATP effectively and allowing you to have more energy during a workout. And it also helps hydrate the cells within your muscle. It helps with intracellular water retention, which has a lot of other beneficial effects towards training. So for those reasons, I typically recommend always that you take it pre-workout. Your cells will be saturated with creatine no matter what format you use it. If you take it consistently, you're going to reach a point of saturation. I know a lot of people like to load creatine. All that means when you front load creatine is you just reach saturation sooner. You're not getting any enhanced benefits, you just saturate the cells sooner. If you did the same thing with just taking a normal dose for a week, you would reach the same saturation point. So there's no point in going beyond that. I really don't see the use in front loading. It's going to cause you a bunch of digestion issues and stomach bloating when you would get the same saturation by just waiting a little bit longer by taking a normal dose of it. So I would take 5 grams pre-workout. I like to get flavorless powders and just mix it in with my pre. So if I use a pre-workout, I like to use Bucked Up just because it's lower on the caffeine side. I don't like high stim. I take a scoop of non-flavored creatine. I dump it in with my pre-workout shake. I shake it up, call it a day.
Guys, do you have any other questions? I see Eneryu typing.
Yeah, so we have we're typing, and then I'll take one more question, then we'll go into some myths for the last 15 minutes. We'll do some quick rapid fire stuff that are probably very, very common that people probably still believe in here. A couple things that I definitely do not like, and some hills that I'll die on.
Yeah,
My father goes to the gym as well, but has quite a lot of back problems. Do you have any exercises that might help him? Random question. No, it's okay. Honestly, man, the funny thing is I actually rehab a lot of patients with back pain with deadlifts. I think people are way too fearful of exercises. We work in physical therapy, we work on a principle of something called graded exposure. It's essentially the same thing as progressive overload, but with exercise, in a sense that rehabilitative exercise. Essentially that like, if you have trouble bending over because your back hurts, I'm going to scale that movement back to a pain-free point, and then I'm going to slowly increase the amount of motion you're doing and also what you're using as far as load. So for example, if I have a client that has really bad, yes, Yamada, I'll answer that question in a second. If I have a patient with back pain who can't bend over to pick up an item, I'm going to, or let's say he can't deadlift from the floor. He has really restrictive range of motion in his lower back. The first thing I would do is I would find a pain-free, scaled back progression of that movement. So whether it's pulling off of like 6-inch blocks, whether it's pulling from like a knee height rack, or whether it's just using just the bar, I'm going to find that scaled back progression that's not going to give you pain, and then we're going to slowly build up from there. So for example, I had a patient a while back who had back pain. He couldn't pull from the floor. It gave him too much pain. So we started with rack pulls, and we did rack pulls for 3 weeks, slowly increasing the amount of weight, and then we lowered the height of the rack by 6 inches. And then we did it again. And then we did it again. And then we started pulling from the floor with light weight. And then we started adding weight. And then over time, a period of 10 to 12 weeks, he has no more back pain because we took that motion, we scaled it back, and then we slowly built up that tolerance again. That's purely all that rehabilitative exercise is. It's finding a pain-free starting point and then slowly building back up that tolerance. It's not too much too soon and not too little too infrequently. You have to find that balance, and that's where a good rehab exercise or physical therapist specialist may come in. That's really a good, some of them are bad, some of them are good, kind of shop around. But that's all it's going to be, man, is just treat it like progressive overload. Okay, 5 essential supplements. If we're going to use any supplements, okay, the 5 that I would always recommend. If you are anybody, if you look at cross-sectional human literature, vitamin D is clinically low in virtually fucking everybody that has ever done blood work with me or has ever lived in the northern hemisphere. Even if you do get a lot of sunlight, I still see it clinically low when we do a vitamin D 25 hydroxy analysis. So vitamin D, 5,000 IUs every day, at least. I think everybody could benefit from that. Vitamin D is not only responsible for energy and mood and other things, but it also plays a key role in contractile force of muscle, which is an underlying thing that not a lot of people realize with vitamin D. It actually is responsible for muscle contractile force. It's a sort of a dark horse, not a dark horse, but a hidden benefit from it that not a lot of people realize. So vitamin D, 100% top of the list. Next one is omega-3 fish oils. Omega-3 fish oils consisting of EPA and DHA. 2 to 3 grams per day, I think, is extremely beneficial for cholesterol, overall joint health, and many other metabolic needs. So I think fish oil is absolutely critical. So vitamin D, omega-3s, creatine monohydrate. There's no added benefit you're getting from any sort of ionized hydrochloride. Like just take the cheap monohydrate powder. There's no selling point that really has any sort of evidence to back it up. Just use the monohydrate. So that's number 3 would be creatine. Number 4 would be a protein powder of someone, of some variety or brand, whatever protein powder you like, whatever one you find consistent. There's obviously some that are better than others. There's some that are third-party tested. There's others that are not. But any decent whey protein powder is very helpful, especially for meals. And then the last one I would probably say would be, honestly, this is where I get into it. I think if you're someone who struggles to build up the energy, I think a pre-workout is extremely helpful for a lot of people. I know a lot of people don't necessarily think it's essential. I don't think it's essential either. I did a cup of coffee for years pre-workout, but I think pre-workout, one, gives people the mental focus. It gives them the enhanced pump with the nitric oxide boosters. It gives people a much more euphoric experience with exercise, and I think it's very, very helpful for a vast majority of people where it's not abused. Because what you guys have to realize with caffeine is essentially an adenosine receptor antagonist. So you have this molecule in your body called adenosine. When it binds to your receptors in your brain, it slows down your nerves and it makes you sleepy. It's essentially the hormone that builds up throughout the day that makes you responsible for wanting to fall asleep later on at night. So what caffeine essentially does is it blocks the receptor site for adenosine. It's the same molecular shape. So your body can't bind it and cause the effects of feeling sleepy and tired. So when your body realizes, hey, these receptors are being blocked, oh my God, what the fuck? Like that shouldn't really happen. So it thinks that there's a reason that the opposite should take place because you're blocking the sleepy hormones. So it starts to spike adrenaline and it makes you very wakeful and attentive. But the problem with that is a lot of people I know, one of the things they tell me is, oh, when I have a cup of coffee or caffeine, I crash right afterwards. And there's a big reason that happens. So when you wake up in the morning, you are an animal that has went through some form of evolution, like every other animal on this earth. We have certain mechanisms in our body that make a lot of sense. One of which is adenosine starts to clear itself in response to sunlight. So what happens is when you wake up in the morning and you go and you get sunlight, adenosine, in response to sunlight, you have actual photoreceptors in your skin. Your body's like, okay, it's morning, it's time to be awake, and it starts to dissipate away that adenosine, and then over time throughout the day it builds back up eventually until nightfall. But if you take your caffeine before your body's had a chance to clear that adenosine away from seeing sunlight, well, what's going to happen is that adenosine will still be freely floating around. So as soon as those receptors free up that caffeine was blocking, bam, it shoots right in there and you crash hard because you have all that buildup of adenosine still left circulating around. And once that caffeine wears off, it's going to smash you. So that's one way that I recommend to use it is as soon as you wake up, go get sunlight for about 15 to 20 minutes and then have your caffeine after that. Just at least get 20 minutes of sunlight, get it in your eyes, get it on your skin, allow your body to start that process of getting itself to be awake. And then about an hour after you've been awake and you've got some sunlight, then have your caffeine and you won't have as bad of a crash. That's just like the number one tip I recommend. And those are the top 5 supplements. So again, to recap with that long-winded answer, vitamin D, omega-3s, creatine, pre-workout, whey protein powder. Those are my top 5. Quick one. Do you use Oxford Muscle Strength Grading Scale over in the States? What are your thoughts on it, if or not? No, I typically don't. I don't like to use graded scales for genetically unique individuals. I don't think they're 100% helpful because everybody's different. Everybody responds different. What I care about is if that individual is progressing and getting stronger and making, consistent results happen. I don't care about the minutia and the scale and grade of it. I don't. I see what you mean. I mean, an hour after being awake and at minimum of 20 minutes of sunlight, then have the caffeine. Those two things should be true at once. A little bit confusing the detail there, but yeah, you get the gist.
Perfect. Yamada, do you have a question? Roland, do you have a question?
No, I think he's typing. Just quoting, so I remember. I just listened to Huberman podcast and he talked about the benefits of blue light from direct sunlight for sleep. Yeah, I mean, it's huge because the sooner you get sunlight into your eyes, the sooner adenosine clears in the morning. And the more time throughout the entire time that you're awake, adenosine has to build back up. So we call that sleep debt in a sense. So the sooner you get sunlight, the sooner that adenosine clears, the sooner you start to build it back up over a slow, prolonged period. And the more that debt from being in a sleepy state builds up, you are more tired by the time nightfall comes and you fall asleep faster and it's easier. Yeah, true. All right, Ayo, let's do some quick rapid fire myths if you want, and then I'll head out.
Perfect. Let's start with I've been trying to find a lot, and I've been answering most of them in my head. Right. So if you aren't sore, you're not getting a good workout. Fact or myth?
Yeah, it's a myth. Soreness isn't the best gauge simply because there's so many things that can conflate it. Your amount of hydration, your amount of sleep, whether you rotated exercises or not. I mean, if you've done let's say a bench press for 6 months, and then you all of a sudden go and do like a heavy chest press machine with a unique movement pattern that you haven't done before, like your body is gonna be like very sore from that. And it's not because the workout was so much better, it was just because your muscles haven't recruited or contracted or fired in that same pattern before. It's sort of a new stimulus, and it'll create a lot of inflammation, which is soreness. Also, too, if you're very tired or you're very sleepy and you go and train vigorously, you're going to be. If you're not hydrated, if you're not well fed, and you go and you train your ass off, you're going to be more sore because you're going to have more inflammation buildup. And that's just the reality. So a lot of things can conflate it. I think soreness can be helpful to gauge how you're doing, but it's nowhere near the be all end all. And if it's not present, it's definitely not because you just shit the bed. As you get more experience with training, the same amount of things you do will cause less and less soreness over time. So that's where we start to get into a little bit of minutia. But no, it's not. It doesn't mean that you just didn't have a good workout or you're just a loser. No.
Cool. Another one. Fact or myth? Muscle turns into fat if you'd stop working out. We all know this.
No, that's the
Yeah.
biggest
I told you there're going
bullshit
to be
myth
some
in the
troll words. You're going to
world.
be triggered. We're going to
Yeah,
have
yeah.
like a
So
clippable
I want
moment.
people to understand that a muscle is the muscle cells are called myocytes. There is no mechanism in the fucking world that can make a myocyte turn into an adipocyte. An adipocyte meaning a fat cell. They're two entirely separate cells with entirely different morphologies. You are not going to get a myocyte to turn into an adipocyte. It's not how it works. Your mother lied to you. Your grandmother lied to you. It's never going to happen. It's just not how it works. The 40-year-old dude who told you that's going to take place is just a guy who got lazy and started eating cheeseburgers. That's all that happened. He just gained more fat, and his muscle went away after he didn't train.
Don't worry, I've got some of my clippable moments. Another one would be you can target areas for fat burn. Fact or myth?
No, you cannot. Your body will pull
Just
from
have the
wherever
same
it wants
reaction as
to.
you had in the previous questions. That was great.
Yeah. That one is another one. Your body's going to pull fat from wherever it wants to, wherever it deems in the moment. You
Mhm.
can't change it. You can't influence it. You can't make it pull from your little love handles. Complete myth. It's never going to happen. I don't care how many crunches you do. I don't care how many things you try to manipulate. You're never going to get a specific response from your body to burn fat in a certain area over another one first. Now,
Okay.
there are certain commonalities among men and women where your body likely pulls fat from first because of where you store it more commonly. Females store more fat in the hips and in the glutes. Men store more fat in the stomach area and in the love handles. So those areas typically will see more fat reduction first in males and females. But it's not because of anything you're doing to influence that.
Okay. Here's another one. Fact or myth? You should stretch before working out and also after. We can treat that as separate.
We have to distinguish between dynamic stretching and statically stretching. So, statically stretching, like just bending over and touching your toes and holding that stretch position, you should never do before a workout. Because if you think of your muscles like a rubber band, there's a certain length of muscle belly that your muscle is used to being. So, if you go into statically stretching, you're lengthening temporarily the overall length of your muscle belly. So now when you can go and So now when you go and start working out and adding external load to those muscles, it's dispersing the force into areas that it typically has never been exposed to before and areas that are typically weak. It's like adding resistance to a frayed cable because now that
Mm-hmm.
cable's been stretched and then you're stressing it afterwards. So if you look at literature, there's actually a lot of studies that show increased injury risk with static stretching before exercising with resistance. It's not a good thing to do. I'd never recommend it. Dynamic stretching, however, where you're actively moving and going through like ranges of motion, like high knee, I'm perfectly okay with that. Um, Now, statically stretching after a workout, yeah, that's fine. Do I think it really has any utility? Not really. I think we see that weight training increases flexibility almost as well as statically stretching does to an extent. So I don't really see the utility in really stretching at all. Even for myself, I don't really see the need for it. Um, So that would be my answer to that. But you can do it if you like to, 100%. I mean, it's fine. Does cardio get rid of muscle? Nope. It just utilizes energy and causes energy excess, or I'm sorry, it causes more energy to be spent during the day. Factor myth: combination lifts are better than isolated movements. I mean, as far as overall stimulus, yeah, they're going to create more stimulus, but both of them have their place. They both have, many essential things that make them useful for growing muscle tissue. I would never, choose. I mean, if there was a gun to my head and I had to pick one or the other, I would pick the compound lift. But I'm never going to be segregated to only have to use one or the other. So, I would always utilize both of them.
Perfect. I've got a troll one, and this can be your opinion. Athlenex is the best fitness influencer on YouTube. Fact
No,
or
he's a
myth?
fucking moron.
Okay.
He, he's a complete fucking moron. I'm sorry. I'm a physical therapist, and it's just like half of the shit he says is so 1980. I mean, you can tell he went to school years ago. It's just not up to date, and a lot of it is just terrible information. There's some things that are good, but a lot of it is just bad.
Yeah.
And I like Jeff. I looked up to him early on, but the more I started to learn and really delve into research and look at things from an outside in, I just realized how little he actually,
Yeah, and he does
and
so
it
much
killed me, 'cause
clickbaiting as well. Yeah.
yeah, and I was my hero growing up, and then I realized he was an idiot. So,
Oh, well, you're
that
lucky. I
that one
used to
hurt
look up
me.
to Conor Murphy when I was a kid, so.
Oh God, yeah, it's another one,
Because
man. Wow,
he was
Callum
kind of
von
cool.
Moger
Like when he
too.
first started on YouTube, like he was pretty cool. He was doing that stuff where he was at the
Thoughts
top of
on
like a.
non-regulated vitamins like ashwagandha. Okay, this is actually a pretty good caveat. Ashwagandha is a herb. Ashwagandha is typically used for many different reasons. Some of it is because they have shown by transient I mean short-term increases in testosterone levels. The problem is those short-term increases don't really ever equate to anything tangible long term. It really isn't this performance-enhancing supplement that people say it is. It's just there's no mechanism at hand that keeps that testosterone level elevated for a long enough period of time, or elevated enough to make a substantial difference. Remember, 95% of testosterone is bound up. So you just increasing overall serum levels won't necessarily mean that it's going to go to muscle building purposes. And ashwagandha you have to be careful with because ashwagandha can actually interact with a certain serotonin receptor that's involved in signaling with serotonin. So some people who take ashwagandha actually experience SSRI-like effects of like blunted emotions, things that excite them don't excite them anymore. They become kind of emotionally numb. That happens a lot with some people that take ashwagandha because of that interaction with a certain serotonin receptor. I don't know the receptor name offhand, but it's a pretty big dark horse of that herb that not a lot of people know about. So I would definitely caution people who who look into utilizing that. Same thing goes with lion's mane. I'm not really necessarily impressed with its effects or of what it can do for testosterone increases. Same thing with Tonga Ali. I'm just really not impressed with what it has to offer. Because does Gynetrol or Gynomeds work, or will just working out help? If you have gynecomastia, you have that formulated glandular tissue. You got to cut it out with a knife. I'm around it. It's a cosmetic surgery. It's usually not covered by insurance, and I hate that that's the answer that I have to give. But if that gyno has been present for any amount of time, longer than like a month, and you haven't caught it super early on, you got to get it cut out. That's just the answer that is unfortunate, but the true answer. What are the best YouTubers and podcasters for fitness nowadays? I don't know. I don't listen to many of them. So many of them are dog shit that I just don't even really bother. And I find most of them to be honestly pretty boring. I find bodybuilders honestly pretty boring. A lot of them are pretty mundane and robotic at most. But I would say, as far as information purposes, I really, really, really like a lot of what Phil Viz does, a lot of what Chris Tuttle does. Um, I like a lot of the information as far as training that some of the bigger bodybuilders like Justin Shire and what's another good one? Justin Shire, mm, Phil Viz, Chris Tuttle, John Jewett is another great resource. Scott Howell. John Jewett is really, really good for overall things bodybuilding and encompassing nutrition. He's a registered dietitian who really knows his stuff. Corey Hagman, a female, is another amazing asset and resource for those things as well. So those are my main guys that I look up to as far as information is concerned. Squat University is another guy that I do not like whatsoever. He made these. One of the things that I really started to make me dislike Squat University was the insinuation that narrow-toed shoes occluded blood flow and caused bunions. We know from the clinical literature over the course of years that bunions are almost purely hereditary and genetic. There's very little evidence at all that anything as far as shoe size or spacing or toe position influences the development of bunions. Not only that, the studies that he linked to market his shoes and having wide space toe shoes, he said, oh, well, if the toe is jammed into this position, it occludes blood flow and decreases blood flow. The paper he cited, 40% of the people also had an increase in blood flow. So how do you explain that? How do you have this decreases blood flow, but in the other half of people it increases it? Well, that doesn't make any fucking sense. So a lot of the things that he claims as absolute truths and uses to market his things are founded on a shaky, shitty foundation of evidence. And he's selling his shoes at a high market price with really no benefit that makes a lot of sense or has a lot of evidence to back it up. I think Squat University overall is a better content creator than most, but I think a lot of his things, especially from a physical therapy standpoint, are pretty cookie cutter and non-evidence based, which is unfortunate. But, again, a lot of physical therapists, they're trained in the same system and they don't really do any independent research because either they don't have the time or what they're doing works well enough. Yeah, tread lightly with everybody's info, man. I mean, just do your own independent research. Okay, I will say this. Aaron Kubal, Aaronkubal, is an amazing resource. He's one of the only musculoskeletal guys in the scene right now who truly, truly is evidence-based and goes through the copious amounts of research and makes the clinical observations and rationales based on the evidence we do have. And his stuff on graded exposure techniques and self-rehab is phenomenal. I love Aaron Kubal. I think his content is phenomenal. Because he's one of the only people that I've seen that have read the research that I have and have come to the same conclusions and understood things from a broad stroke perspective and were able to apply the clinical rationales from that and really took the time to look into what else could be at play. Is there biases? What is the influence? Because a lot of the studies, especially in rehab, especially in physical therapy offices, they'll have studies on modalities to where their evaluations of how well they worked were based on a metric that was created in that physical therapy office. If that's not the fucking definition of bias, I don't know what is. So I really, really like his stuff. Cannot speak highly enough of Aaron Kubal. All right, guys, it's 3:40. I ran a little bit over. I want to thank all you guys for taking the time out to listen today and ask questions.
Quickly, Doc, before you go, one last question is where can people find you? So your socials, anything you want to plug, post it in the chat, say it out loud, send it to me. I'll also post it on the stream. Go ahead.
I'm going to post it in here. I haven't posted a lot of content on my socials simply for the fact that I have had a lot with trying to find the time to post content with my studies. Again, like being a full-time graduate student as well as, being a full-time bodybuilder, it's very, very difficult to find the time to create content, at least right now in the stage that I'm at. I will try to learn. I will try to find time to post more content more frequently soon enough. But again, I run a coaching business, so I coach bodybuilders, I coach physique athletes, I go to graduate school full time. So I would love to pump out more content, but it's just very difficult for me. But this medium I like because I can not only answer these questions, but I can focus on other things that I need to do on my laptop as well as while I'm answering these things and going in depth. So these things work really well for me to be able to present information and help people learn, and I'm happy to do it. So every Sunday we can make this a segment. I'll drop my socials below. You can follow me on there. I'm going to start posting more stuff as I get closer to my show. I'm 5 weeks out right now. start posting more content on my socials when I have the time. I'm pretty lean right now, and I'm very tired most days because, you know, bodybuilding is not easy. So you're gonna see a lot less energy from me on a daily basis, but
Mm,
I can some days are my rest days, so it works better for me to like do something like this.
mm.
But I'm gonna drop my all my socials have that handle, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Instagram. So follow me on there. I just put it in the VC chat. So if anyone's listening,
Okay.
go to the
Anyone who
VC
can't see
chat
it, it's
itself.
MTO _ coaching. And also Doc, don't worry, I've got you. I've recently put together a social
Hmm.
media team. So you know, with like all the clips of this, I can add some videos of yours and do some captions where you're talking over and just make it look really cool. I'll update you
Yeah, brother, I
concerning that.
really appreciate that.
So don't worry about that.
Thank you.
Just keep being you. And like I said, everybody helps each other. And one thing I would hope or like ask everybody who's like here to do, please follow him on whatever social media medium that you have. Add him as a friend. Just make him feel appreciated. So if you only have like TikTok, or if you only have like you Instagram or whatever, again it's MTO _ coaching. And to get the full VOD, it's going to be on this Twitch, Effective Fitness, on YouTube, and yeah, pretty much. Thank you all for listening. Really do appreciate this, Doc. You're heaven sent, and I really do hope you get the rest that you need. And yeah, once again, thanks.
Yeah, we'll talk more about you know, how we can interact with the social media, and I really appreciate if we, you know, find ways to help me edit videos and stuff like that and do captions. So I'm excited for that. I really appreciate it. All right,
Perfect.
guys, you guys take it easy. If you guys have any questions or you guys want to have inquiries about coaching or maybe working with me, just send me a DM. I may not get back to you right away, but I'll always get back to you at some point. So if you guys want to work one-on-one with me, I'll give you my rates. We'll do a consultation, and we'll go from there. But you guys take it easy, and I'll be on soon.
See you, dude. Take care. Bye bye. Cool. Everyone, don't leave just yet. Anyone who wants to go to like the gaming section, Geo is coming. So for those of you who like to troll and have fun, you can go into the gaming channel. I think you do have like permissions or whatever to stream. So if you want to stream your games or whatever, go to the gaming channel. And yeah, let us know if you need anything else. And use this opportunity to make friends. Voice chat is active. Let's go.
Thank you, man.
No problem.
Thanks.